Welcome to another Kundalini conversation. My guest today is Jacob Rhines, aka Jacob from the internet. Welcome, Jacob. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm very excited to talk to you again. I really enjoy our interactions, so I'm pumped to be here, man.
Yeah, we recently had a conversation on your podcast, the Junkyard Love podcast, and admittedly, I talked way more than you did. And so my intention today is to give you a chance to speak because, during our conversation, it was about my journey, but you had sprinkled a little bit of hints and clues about some of the things that you went through that sounded really exciting. Some Kundalini awakening experiences seems to have begun, I guess, in your mid-20s, about six years ago now. But of course, as we were just talking before we started a conversation, it seems like for many of us, we look back and our teens or even our childhood, and we see there's spiritual phenomena, spiritual experiences, if not just spiritual interest was clear very early on before we even knew what to call it. So maybe we'll get into that today. You and I feel like we have got a lot in common. I see in the background there on your wall you've got the words turning pro. Of course, that's uh, two very powerful words from one of my favorite authors, and I would say probably my favorite book ever he's written, The War of Art.
Mm.
And I take it it's really influenced you. It's really influenced me as well. Like I said, my favorite book ever, and it's what got me started in doing this work. And so I'd love to hear about your relationship with that type of work as an artist yourself, a musician, very creative person we have here. Everybody is Jacob, spoken word artist, DJ. You've done some visual art as well on your channel. There's some interesting videos and things on your Instagram and whatnot. And so we'll get into all of that. So I'll stop talking here. And like I said, we're going to give you the floor. Take it away, Jacob. Tell us about your spiritual awakening journey. And from there, we'll tease out some of the difficulties you faced, solutions you found, and any other interesting themes that come up. So how did it all begin for you?
Mm. Well, I mean, we kind of start with the War of Art, the Stephen Pressfield work. I feel like it kind of ties in. So towards the beginning of when I started going through, my spiritual awakening was through like many suffering, right? Um, I just kind of like got to the edge of who I thought myself to be. It wasn't working out. I was dealing with massive anxiety, depression. I was actually like, there's ways in which I would describe myself as obsessive compulsive, or just, overly obsessed about things that really interest me. There's a way that I got kind of obsessed with like suicide and stuff, which sounds kind of icky and strange, but I'll elaborate more. Um, the War of Art. So amongst my healing, I started reading all these things and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos and listening to lectures. And somewhere along the way, I heard about The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and it just kind of like seemed like a cool book. And I think that I bought it. I think I bought a physical copy, but I could not get myself to sit down and read it. And I couldn't sit still long enough to read it, but I knew I really wanted to read it. Um, so I ended up getting it on Audible, and I hit play in my driveway. I was like very determined. I was like, I want to read this book. I was very like kind of mean to myself at this moment in my kind of healing journey. I was like so mad that I couldn't sit down and read it. So I bought on Audible, and I'm a runner. I really like running. And so I was like, cool, I'm just going to hit play in my driveway, and I don't stop running until I finish this book. So it was cool because like you don't even realize how much that intertwines with the themes of the book. Fighting resistance. If anybody else has ever read this book, it's you'll understand the correlations. But yeah, so I read it, and it was, dude, it was also so profound to me. It was really like putting words on this thing that is common amongst people who are artists, is common amongst creators. We have this resistance, and our job is to accept the resistance and get in contact with the muse. And so it just felt like I kind of won that battle. Stephen Pressfield talks about how he finally found himself, like he wrote a little bit, and then he was washing the dishes, and he was like whistling as he cleaned the dishes, and then he kind of had this moment of realization, like, oh, I just like did the work. like I'm at this place of peace doing the dishes because I did my work that I'm supposed to be doing. And so for me, as I was running and I finally finished the book, and I was like, man, oh, I just did my work. Like I found a way to make it work for me personally. Like my version of creating and doing the work has just been done. Cool. I did my work for the day I ran, and I finished this book that I was determined to do it. So, yeah, that's the War of Art, which Turning Pro thing on my wall is, I think, the second book in the series of sorts with Stephen Pressfield, second or third.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just, like we discussed before, Brett, was it's kind of like taking your work serious. Like, dude, if you're an artist, if you have these thoughts and ideas, it's clear that not everybody else does. And so your work is to take your work seriously and do what you got to do. Like sit down. It's not like you write when you feel like writing. It's you write because you made a schedule to sit down at 9 a.m. every day. That sort of thing, um, which is always kind of a struggle to be natural about your work as well as be rigorous. There's kind of a fine line between not forcing it, not strangling the art by like, I got to sit down and finish this thing because people need to hear it and I need to change the world, versus just doing what you must do. So I had, we mentioned before we started recording that a lot of the Kundalini awakening stuff, the spiritual awakening things are, as we get through them, a few years into them, we start to realize that it's not really a one moment. Like I would say that my Kundalini awakening happened when I was 26, 27, but in retrospect, I see how my entire life has played into it. I had what I would consider, and for a long time, I would consider myself a complete victim of these things. But I had just a tough childhood, man. I just, um, essentially, my father got addicted to like really hard drugs when I was like 8 or 9, and it completely crumbled our family structure. I have some older sisters, and you know, long story short, I ended up kind of like raising myself in a lot of ways from those years. And so just like the way that I had experienced the world was like, oh, dude, none of these adults are taking care of me. I got to take care of myself. And so the way that I learned to kind of interface with the world, interface with my life was, um, it really worked for me. And it really is what I needed to do as a young kid and a teen. But as you get older, you realize that the armor you created when you were younger doesn't serve you going forward. And so the structures that I had created to kind of like, let's say spiritually bypass from learning from my trauma, they did work for me, and I was successful in certain areas of my life. But as I got older, these things, like this pain of this little kid who's still hurting inside me starts beating on the walls from the inside, and yeah, so essentially when I was 26, my Kundalini waking was kind of like the structure of the person that I had built just he didn't work anymore. Like it just was not working for me. The way that I thought, the things I thought about, the way that I treated myself internally was just, it wasn't a long-term game for me. And so I think that, I don't know, I don't want to, I was actually debating on whether I would explain this part. There was kind of a moment where, in retrospect, I can kind of see that it was almost like the opening moment in some senses. But I actually, so I'm a DJ. I've been a DJ since I was 20, I think. And just inevitably with the world of DJing and clubs and in bars and staying up late and those sorts of things, like partying and drug use and all this stuff was part of my journey. And I wasn't like really super deep into it. I was kind of the guy who would like play a little bit along. I'd have a couple beers, sort of thing. I've been drunk plenty of times, of course, but the cocaine came into the world, and that kind of like that really like exacerbated my like self-worth problems inside, and it would just turn into me like trying to get high to shut up this internal voice, to try to this extreme form of escapism. And I had this night. I was in a long-term relationship. I had this night where we were out at the bar, and I was I was cool guy Jake. Everybody knows me. I play at this bar all the time. The bartenders like ignore the person in front of them and get my drink. You know, this like ego. Yeah, man, I'm popular here. I'm cool. This is like I'm the jock in high school. This is my vibe here. And you know, people had bought me shots, and so essentially I was like a little too tipsy, and I got behind the wheel of my car, and I had my girlfriend next to me, and I reached into my wallet and I pulled out this bag of Coke, and I did a key bump. And it was interesting because it's like as soon as I did that, like I don't know if I, you know, punched my prefrontal cortex in the face or something with this, but it was like I had this out of body experience when I did this bump of cocaine. And it was suddenly like I was aware of what I was doing and who I was and my story, and like I was this out of body kind of like my higher self or something going, dude, what are you doing? And it was this really loud, like I was like sitting there, I was like looking at my girlfriend going, what am I'm like drinking and then doing blow so I could feel a little bit more sober so I could drive home. You know, what is this? Why would I do this? Um, and so I think like that seemed to be a lot of the start of my just extreme internal self-reflection. Like I had my friend come over afterwards and we were like drinking and doing more blow that night, but the whole time I'm just like massively aware. I'm like miles away from being present. Um, and I don't know, it just like I became extremely aware of what I was doing and my influences on other people. And you know, like even driving behind, you know, if you're driving a car and you've got a car full of people or a car full of people you love, you're responsible for those people. You know, if you're drinking and driving, you got other people in the car, like that's your responsibility if they're hurt. And that sort of voice just came incredibly loud. And so um, I think that, I don't know, it kind of turned on this awareness that I wasn't aware of. You know, I was saying a little bit ago that I was kind of obsessed with like suicide and like if you ever, Brett, have you ever heard of the 27 Club in the world of
Yeah.
like artistry? And you
Hmm.
know, Kurt Cobain and these artists, you know, they it's like, man, if my nobody's really going to listen to my work unless I'm dead, you know, they'll appreciate me when I'm gone, you know. And um it's this weird like toxic selfish you're just so unaware of who you are and what you bring to other people. Um, and so I guess I kind of just became massively aware that I was obsessed with those sorts of things. Like I was like, oh, I just had kind of accepted, oh, I'll be in the 27 Club. Like, oh, I guess like this is the year that I'll probably take my life, or next year I'll probably take my life. And I started becoming aware of how crazy that was. Like, what am I? You know, I'm fantasizing about these things. I'm obsessing about how cool it's going to be when I'm dead. You know, like what? That's so crazy. You know. So yeah, I think it just kind of started this extreme self-help obsession. Like I really just could not shut off the fact that like the who I was not going to work out for me, and that was a legitimate problem. The person that I had created was not going to be able to continue to go forward. Um, and I should pay attention to that, you know, like I shouldn't just be accepting, oh, this guy's going to kill himself and that's me. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I continued to I continued to DJ. I was still kind of like in that world. I just like slowly started stop drinking. I just less and less drinking. I stopped partying a lot. Like I would stop doing coke. I just didn't really have any urge to do it. Like I didn't really want to do it. I had done it a couple times after that, but for the most part, I didn't want to do it. I actually started smoking a lot of weed just because I was like, I had a bunch of sleep issues. I was on antidepressants at this time. I just I wasn't being a good person, and so I had all this internal just noise, man. I was just so many layers buried deep beneath this like cool guy, you know. And so it's like my structures were breaking, but there was something that happened that seemed to notice it and take it seriously suddenly. Of dude, nobody's gonna save you but you, sort of thing. Um, so I guess over the last over the coming years after that, I just got massively more obsessed with self-help, personal growth. I always really liked these things. Like I said, I had kind of been on my own since I was younger. So the things that I had learned about the world were, in a way by my own hand. Like when I was, 16, 17, I was the personal development section in the library was my favorite. I loved all those things, but it was almost like I was blind uh, to a lot of other very obvious stuff. Um, and so I would spend a lot of time at home. I would just listen to podcasts and I would listen to YouTube lectures. And I stumbled into like all these people who would present the world and present subjects and present their opinions on the world in ways that I'd never heard anybody speak before. There's this group of people, it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, but they were deemed the intellectual dark web. Have you heard of this? It's Sam Harris, Joe
No.
Rogan.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so it's this world of these guys, and they kind of like accidentally named themselves, and it's like I said, a little bit tongue in cheek, but Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, and just kind of like everyone in their vicinity. They're like public intellectuals, let's say. And man, my YouTube algorithm was just feeding me that stuff, and I was listening to it. I mean, I get to the point where I was um, uh, somehow I was lucky enough to have like extended periods of time off of work, where I'd maybe do like 1 gig a week, or I would have like a couple months where I wasn't working. I was just in a position to where um, I could spend a lot of time listening to these different perceptions of reality and different views on things that I either hadn't thought of before or I thought I knew a lot about, but I hadn't really sat and thought about it much. I would at that time I would consider myself uh, just to use steal a phrase from a friend of mine, Reed. He says self-diagnosed agnostic. He says, and I would consider myself that. I'm like, or an atheist or something. I'm like, okay, y'all are weird. Like, you really think that there's a magic man in the sky with a beard and whatnot? Like, that was my very simple understanding of it. But I would listen to maybe 12 to 14 hours of YouTube a day in audiobooks and lectures. And I started like buying my own books. That was after a while when I was able to actually read them, sit down and read them. Um, and it started making me think about the world a lot differently. Of course, I was smoking a lot of weed. I know that I don't know if you dealt with this, or if you think about it this way. It seems like when I mention smoking weed and like how intertwined this is, it almost feels a little disregarding to the complexity of the story. It's like, oh, dude, like, are you sure you weren't just super stoned all the time?
Right.
It is in some ways, yes. In some ways that was a way for me to actually allow these things in and kind of penetrate the person I thought myself to be. Um, and it would help me kind of like sit and expand on these ideas. So I would listen to lectures, um, and then I think inevitably we stumble into meditation, right? Like if you're trying to heal, if you have anxiety, depression, like, well, have you tried meditation? And there's these meditation apps, and there's all this stuff, this whole world of self-help. And it brought me into meditation, but the way that I work is I'm like very extreme about things. Like I said, like I get overly obsessed with stuff, and like the way I read that book for the first time was cool. I'm not going to stop running until I finish this book. And so that kind of turned into my mindfulness and meditation journey. I became super obsessed and extreme about, to where I'm listening to these lectures, and it's like the second this lecture is over, or this YouTube video or this podcast or whatever, okay, cool, time to go meditate. And I would meditate for hours and hours a day. And I was learning about meditation. I was learning about the self, and I was doing, Vipassana, and I was doing all these various different kinds. I started doing a ton of yoga. I just started, I mean, it's like extreme mindfulness. I was in this perception of being aware of who I was and what my actions were and how I react and what I am in this world and what it means to be a part of infinity itself. And I was in that realm, just hardcore. Just that's all I would think about. That's all I would talk about. My poor girlfriend at the time, dude. Like, I would, it's funny because I would think that she was understanding, because I'm so obsessed with what I'm thinking about at this time, of course. I would think she was understanding what I'm talking about. And then after a while, she would start to say, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're
Mhm.
like. What are you talking about? Which was actually kind of like painful in the moment, because I suddenly realized, oh, dude, I'm detached from reality, and the
Right.
reality that I'm obsessing about and thinking about is completely distant from this person. So I guess I was able to. So over the course of the season, I think that my like Kundalini awakening was from intense pushing, like this extremely, I'm using this phrase extreme mindfulness, which sounds so dorky, but it's kind of what it was. It was just, I kept pushing. I was like, I got to heal. I got to get better. Like, I got to figure this out. And then it's like, why do I hate myself? What is the self? What is self? Like these things, and I would just follow these strings of thoughts and just pulverize myself with them. Just think about nothing but it and just write about it and record videos of myself talking about it and just try to like research it. And so I had mentioned in our podcast together, Brent, that I had this moment where, because with Kundalini Awakening, we talk about, it's something that you're really great on your channel about expressing that I love is, it's not always this explosion of energy through the top of the head. It's not always, again, I'll bring it up, like you said, a snake coming out of your butt. It just made me laugh when you said that. But it's, for me, I think kind of like, of course, like that night where I had done like a bump of cocaine kind of brought me this crazy awareness. But then I had a couple other few moments that I think that could be very easily intertwined with what we can call Kundalini awakening. I had one where I was listening to this guy, Greg Braden. He's like friends with Joe Dispenza. He's friends with this guy, Bruce Lipton. And I'd been listening to a lot of their work. And he's a musician. And so like a lot of stuff that he talks about and describes, I really resonated with. And he had this brain heart coherence meditation that I would do all the time. And it plays this certain frequency, it's like this 10-minute long video or something I found on YouTube. And I'd listened to it plenty of times before, but it's kind of like my way of getting centered. And I would listen to it and he kind of guides you through this meditation. And it plays this certain frequency. And man, it was the end of the night. My girlfriend at the time, we had this place together. We had a house together. And she was out of town for a few days. And so I was kind of already in this mindset of like, oh, I'm going ham. Like, I don't have to be grounded and talk to my girlfriend about her day at work. This sounds so selfish. Now I'm saying it loud, but it's like I can just go ham on this mindfulness stuff, this exploration of the self stuff. And so I was in that mindset already. Like I was going ham. I was doing a ton of breath work. I was doing a ton of yoga that day. I had meditated for many hours in that morning, or at least an hour, and listening to this brain heart coherence. And I think that I was actually typing out, sending a text to my girlfriend kind of about what I was experiencing. It was probably like this complete nonsensical, like something that she probably didn't understand what I was talking about, but it felt important to me. And something about me typing it as I was listening to this thing made it very real, made it very like it jumped from the world of YouTube into my lived reality. And I had this, have you ever seen the show Jimmy Neutron? It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
So he has this thing, it's called brain blasts. And he gets this idea and he's like, brain blast. And they show this visualization of like the idea going through all his like neural pathways. And it like makes these connections, these ideas light up and different parts of his brain light up. And it was kind of like that. Like I experienced something like a brain blast. This sounds so funny to say out loud. But what happened is like my mind connected to my heart. And I don't know how to explain it. Like I visualized like this something like dropping down into my heart, and then they were suddenly connected. And then I felt just like a crazy surge of energy. And then, dude, honestly, like the next 3 days were crazy. I was in this state. And I think that you've described it before, where I was like stuck in my body. I felt so right now as we're talking, I'm not thinking about breathing. I'm not pumping my organs. I'm not pumping my lungs, but it felt like I was suddenly responsible for all those things. It felt like I was like, if I didn't think about breathing, I would stop breathing or something. And there's a way where I knew that wasn't true, but I couldn't stop looping about this. I was inside my body. Within an hour, I actually like literally had 911 up on my phone, just trying to go, am I okay? What on earth is going on? Well, my air conditioning just turned on. Is that incredibly loud?
Oh, no, it's all good.
Okay. If it gets too loud or annoying, I can totally turn it off. But yeah, so I became just ultra stuck in my body for whatever that means. And it was funny because I didn't know what I had done. I was like, oh, I messed up. I did something very strange here. I was Googling how to shut my third eye. That tells you the information of how I knew of what I was really doing. I was just pushing. Um, Excuse me, Brett. Hang on. Let me turn off my air conditioning really quick. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
for sure. No problem.
It's just so loud, and I don't want it to harm the recording. But yeah. So I was just in this state of like being stuck in my body, and I was home alone, and I was just in this complete state of fear. And I think that when that happened, it kind of made me again like this other realization of, whoa, I'm going hard on this. I'm going crazy intense on this sort of stuff. Um, and so then I'm looking for grounding, and I'm looking for like what is going on. I posted on Reddit. I don't remember what subreddit it was, maybe like spirituality or something, basically like, yo, I think I messed up, can anybody help? I've been listening to all these sound frequencies, and people were sweet enough to suggest some stuff to help me get a bit more grounded. But so I that was certainly a moment. The brain heart coherence thing was definitely something that now I think it'd correlate to something to do with Kundalini. Like I was moving the energies throughout my body, like suddenly surged. And then I had to kind of like, it took me a while to kind of sit with that. Like I don't know that I fully snapped out of the being stuck inside my body thing. Like I think it kind of slowly integrated in a strange way. In yoga and breath work and that sort of thing, of course helps. But and then I had I don't know the exact linear time for all this stuff. It's kind of a blur actually, but I also had a moment where I was doing a hypnosis, like a self-love guided hypnosis. I got like kind of obsessed with hypnosis for a little while. Um, and I was experiencing extreme bliss for certain. I was already in this very blissed out state, but then suddenly I became the color purple and experienced being the color purple. And I don't know how to explain that. Like I was both liquid and smoke in the color purple, and it was like this crazy blissed out state. And I think in like after that, I think I had a few weeks of being just light footed as heck. Like I was just blissed out for a while after that. I also had a moment where I did it's not like a past regression, but it's like I was following some guided meditation. I was doing like some sort of like, what is it, like child healing, like in healing your internal child. And I had this, essentially I was I think I was, just to add to the visualization, I think I was doing breath work and yoga naked in my basement all that day. um it's hilarious to share these things because it just seems so insane now, but I was doing this like childhood thing, following the meditation, and I actually saw my younger self. Like I saw my teenage self. I had mentioned before, I had kind of built up this tough, like this is who I need. And then I suddenly, like in my basement, it's not that I like really thought physical young person walked into my basement or anything, but I saw my younger self. I hugged him, I cried, and I said, "You did great, man. I got it from here." And it was like this, another explosion of just healing. And then I still don't know what to make about this part, because I was listening to a lot of frequencies and stuff. I saw in Hinduism, is it Ganesh with the many arms? Is it?
Many of them have many arms, I think. Uh,
Oh,
Ganesh is the elephant faced.
yeah. Is Ganesh? Is it a female?
Uh,
Or is there?
Ganesh, I think Ganesh is
Gender?
male. Female, there's many actually. I'm not too familiar with all of them myself. There's uh there's countless.
Okay.
Lakshmi, Kali. Kali has many arms. She's kind of fierce. That's a common depiction for Kundalini, the divine feminine. But they all are actually. All the
Hmm.
feminine ones are for sure.
Okay, yeah, because it was certainly had a feminine energy. And it had many arms. I say this, I know I sound like a bit daft, but
No, it's
I
okay.
didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know any of these people. I didn't grow up with a religious or spiritual or any of that. You know, I almost kind of like made fun of that sort of stuff in a way, like
Yeah.
not in like a mean bullying way, but kind of just in like a, all right, y'all are like whatever you want to do, but y'all are crazy about that weird religious spiritual stuff. You know, that's just kind of
Yeah.
like my perception of what God was. But so yeah, after I like hugged my younger self, said thank you, I've got it from here, then there was this moment of experience the many armed God, and it was this feminine thing, and again that put me on another, I would say like probably a couple weeks if not a week, of just blissed out. You know, it's like I had cleared this very big blockage or something. I know that's kind of a bit of a strange term when it comes to like chakras and block chakras and stuff, but yeah, and so let's say like those four experiences were kind of my, now that in retrospect they had something to do with the energy centers in my body. I would say those were moments where my Kundalini was working through me. They put me in an intense blissed out stage afterwards, which was so wonderful in so many ways, and but also because I wasn't grounded at all. I mean, I was not trying to be grounded. Like, you know, I was doing yoga and breath work and stuff, and I was walking barefoot outside, and I was doing a lot of running and working out and that sort of stuff. But just, you know, I would talk to my old friends, or I would have like musicians or artists come over, and just looking back, like the way that I was communicating with them was just very disconnected. I was really kind of like in this state of psychosis. I was just a bit nutty, you know, and they love me. And so they accepted like you're going through what you're going through. And, you know, if I know anything about Jake, he's got this under control. So there was a lot of that, but in retrospect, I see how kind of just intense I was, you know, with all my relationships and talking to people. So, man, I would love to pause my rambling there, and see if you have any questions for me from there, Brent.
Wow. So many common themes between my own journey and that I see across the board for many others as well. Um, Thank you for sharing. I I just had a conversation with James Dearden Bush, and he described something very similar to what you experienced. When you were behind the wheel, about to, do some cocaine. He described that he, as a result of his awakening, had experienced an expanded state of awareness that was unaffected by him drinking. So he got drunk at some point later, and there was part of him that wasn't drunk, but that was aware that he was drunk. Sounds like the same state of consciousness, or same aspect of your consciousness that you had accessed, which could look from almost like an impartial place and say, what the hell is going on here? Even though you're under the influence and whatnot. And that seems to be, I've experienced it myself as well. It seems to be pretty common with those that experience a sort of what we would call a top-down awakening or a crown awakening. And like you said earlier, Kundalini doesn't have to rise from the base upward in sort of explosion. It can happen in many different ways. And for me as well, my initial awakening was of a very similar flavor to yours, where I had recognized I'm not my mind. I can observe my mind. And so I'm the observer, and that blasted me open. That was a major trigger point of my awakening, just like you. Fascinating stuff there. Yeah, the healing stuff also super common, right? Super common stuff with the inner child and whatnot. But even though, I mean, super common amongst those going through this process, I'll put it that way, but not that common in general. Yeah, fascinating. Why don't you keep going with your story? So you're ungrounded, or generally speaking, or you were describing some periods where you're ungrounded. Myself as well. I mean, I can look back and kind of cringe at the way that I was
For sure.
trying to describe my experiences, or trying to, because it was so novel and exciting, I just wanted other people to experience this with me. And I thought, I had to show them what I was going through. They can heal the inner child too, right? And of course, being young, especially, I know, you're young as well. And I guess, we are still relatively young. Some older people might think we still don't have a clue what's going on. But It's exciting, and it's good that at least you had some friends that said, hey, Jake's got it under control. Whatever he's going through, he'll go through it. He'll be okay. I mean, not everybody has that. Some people, their circle will say you need to be put in a straitjacket,
Mhm.
and it happens to many people. So talk to us a little bit about what happens following these periods of intense awakening and healing, and I guess we could call energetic instability. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, man, it's so interesting. It's a because it's like almost still going on in a way. It's almost like still, my not like the turmoil and the confusion and the non-grounded nature of exploring these things, but I mean, I think since then, dude, I'm just so, again, like I said, I've really been interested in kind of the realms of psychology since I was young, kind of the realms of having a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. I said I really liked the self-help section when I was younger. I always loved that sort of stuff, but now it's like I'm just massively I don't want to use the word obsessed like as if I've, cured myself of being obsessive about things, but it's like so much of what I think about is identity and self and personhood and psychology, anthropology, philosophy. I mean, um, in a lot of my artistry work and a lot of my poetry work, I kind of, this sounds a bit self-grandiose, but I kind of like to consider myself a philosopher, and not a philosopher who, I don't have a degree. I didn't go to college for any of this sort of stuff, but, not a philosopher that studies all the great philosophers and could tell you everything that Freud tells you. Like I like the practice of philosophy itself. Like, how do you philosophize your life? How do what just the philosophy of self? Just like super sure obsessed with those sorts of things. And so I've kind of remained in that realm. I consume a lot of podcasts. I consume a lot of audiobooks. I consume a lot of books. And just I contemplate a lot. I do a lot of meditation still. Um, it's a bit more grounded. It's not like the only thing I think about. I don't go into every single interaction in my regular life and try to get people to think about it. What's actually very cool, I will say, is um, I show up and I play the game. Ram Dass has this way of saying, you're in school. Why don't you take the curriculum? He had a disembodied being tell him that, and basically that's like, you know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And it's this, you can't go into everyday life. Like, I still got to pay bills. I still got to work. Um, and most people don't think about this stuff at all. I would say, I don't know what, 98% of people, 95% of people or something aren't in this realm. So if you go to work and you're just trying to like talk about spiritual enlightenment or, like, hey man, you don't really exist, right? They're like,
Yeah.
what? It makes you feel more disconnected from people. And so a lot of the last few years have been almost like my integration back into the world of just being with other people and loving people for exactly who they are, not who I wish they could be. And if they could just see infinity like I see, then they would really understand, and they could heal all their childhood trauma, like you said. And so where I'm at now, um, I mean, I'll say that in a lot of ways, my life kind of did fall apart after all of that. And I hate to say that and like freak anybody out who's going through in any sort of their journey right now, and just bear with me on this story here. But I was in a relationship. We were together for 10 years. Thought we were gonna have kids and get married and those sorts of things. We kind of just decided, like, it was this weird, like, disassociative state, but we kind of just suddenly decided that like that isn't the route that we're going to go, and we're going to split up. And so that was just like, before I knew it, I'm packing my stuff and I'm like, what the hell, what is going on? And then we would have conversations, and we're breaking up at the dinner table, it was very, very civil. This woman is so wonderful. We had, for all of our lack of communication, we had some wonderful communication as well. In retrospect, these were, really such a gift of 10 years with this person. Like we had just an incredible relationship, such a fun time. But it was more of, it was almost like this thing was working through me, and I'm like saying these things out loud and almost again observing myself saying them. Like, is this really what I want? But it was, it's almost like I was noticing that I was following my intuition in a very real way. Like what needed to happen in that moment was this breakup, was this, okay, it's time for something new in my life. Like it's time for the next chapter. But I also was aware of my, like, I don't want to leave this person. This is safe. I like this person. I like this here. My life is cool here. But there was also just this awareness that this isn't for me anymore. I've grown out of this, in a, and not in a better, like I'm higher than you, but just I'm no longer in alignment with this.
Mhm.
And so in order to follow my intuition in order to follow my gut, and this needs to happen. And it was weird. So I'm living in Austin, Texas now. I was living in Washington State then. This was during the pandemic, and my work, where I make my money, has been as a DJ and audio engineer. I have an audio engineering degree, which is actually kind of like a funny degree. Nobody really respects it. It's like this dorky, like it's almost an embarrassing thing to say.
Yeah, I've got an anthropology degree.
Yeah.
People think it's archaeology, and I don't even correct them anymore.
Dude, that's so funny you mentioned that. I just talked to somebody yesterday who confused who conflated those two, and I just, okay, that's what you're gonna find fossils. Um, uh, yeah, but and so I wasn't working, and so I was at this place where I was still pretty out of it in some senses. Like during the breakup, there was still, like, I would have days of bouts of depression where I was just, feeling so sorry for myself, and it was just really hard for me to stay focused. I would still wake up every morning and, listen to Ram Dass and do my meditation and yoga and breath work and all these sorts of things. But I was still just like, it was like I was doing those things just to survive through my day. I was going through a lot of turmoil. This breakup was really tough on me. But yeah, for whatever reason, as we're sitting there at the dinner table, with my ex-girlfriend, I was like, well, I have to move. I have to move. And it was like I was hearing myself say it, go, why? What are you talking about? And I need to move. I had never moved out of that town my whole life, but for whatever reason, I just had this extreme, intuitive thing that I needed to move. And then I end up living with a friend for a few months, and he basically pulled me aside. He's just such a wonderful guy, but he basically said, look, me and my wife, his wife, we're going to move within the next year. Why don't you come live with us? We'll just charge you, we'll be chill on the rent, get you back on your feet, and just wherever we move, why don't you come along? And I was like, all right, bet. And so we landed in Austin, Texas, which, from a creative standpoint, um, uh, artistry and all these other things. I had followed a lot of people who had moved to Austin. I was really drawn by, like, the artistry and the music scene and stuff. So it was cool. So that's where I've landed now, is in Austin. It's been really fun. But I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. I had already started my podcast. I'm at like 100 episodes now, but my podcast was kind of like trying to help people go through the same thing as me at the beginning. I would say a lot of my earlier episodes are, I mean, they're cringe. They're still available, but I was still learning how to talk to people. I was still learning how to listen. I was still learning how to meet people where they're at, and not like force them into the corners of, you're on my show, we're going to talk about this. That, like, there's this balance of sorts, with these conversations. And so I started interviewing and talking to a lot of my friends and, people in the community and people that I looked up to. And I had a podcast studio at that time in my basement at the house that we had, so I could have them come over. And it was just this such cool thing. They would come over, and we'd go for a walk, or we would, smoke a bowl and hang out in the backyard for a couple hours before the podcast. And it was just this very, very cool experience. But I had started it. The concept, Junkyard Love is the name, is I had realized that when I was listening to these people on YouTube and online and audiobooks and these sorts of things, that they would unknowingly say something that would completely shift my reality. You know, 2 hours and 15 minutes into a podcast of two comedians just BSing, they would say one thing, one sentence in such a certain way that I would be primed to, for whatever reason, that I would like pause the podcast and just go, whoa. You know, I would almost watch my reality shift, and I would allow that to enter through me and go, oh, I haven't thought about life like that. I haven't challenged my ideas like that, you know? And so the concept is sort of, it might be gibberish, you know, your story might not seem important, but when you share it, it might be really important to somebody else. You know, the example I use is, you know, a 1996 Buick LeSabre passenger side mirror is completely worthless to somebody who doesn't have a 1996 Buick LeSabre with a missing passenger side mirror, you know. And so that was just kind of the thing, is like, your story is very important, and there's something that you can say about just communicating your truth that could be profound to someone. It could change their whole life, you know. And so share it, you know, share where you're at, and don't you know, and you've mentioned this in your videos too, is don't wait till you think you're ready. A lot of the times, you know, like, make it messy if it's messy. If you stumble over and you say, like, or you you know, you don't know exactly how to explain your story, but you kind of stumble through it, cool, that's what it is right there. That's okay. And so I had started the podcast. I had started at that time, I'd already been a DJ, you know, say this is around, you know, 27, 28. I'd already been DJ since I was like 19, 20. And I hadn't made a ton of my own stuff. So being a DJ is, a lot of times you're not really representing, you know, you're playing other people's music, you're mixing and mashing, you're looking around the room and you're seeing what that room would want. You're being a tastemaker, you're on top of the current music, you anticipate people's needs before they anticipate it. You know what's popular, you know, the hottest song in the world right now, if you play it at, you know, 10:21, it might suck, but if you play it at 11:38 p.m., you might change the entire room, you know. And so I was just very, I was on the pulse. There's a lot of ways that I was certainly an artist as a DJ, and I would create these hour-long sets, and I just wanted, like, my DJ name at the time was Kronos, DJ Kronos, who's the Greek Titan of time. And that was kind of born of, you know, I had experiences in crowds at music festivals and stuff where time itself would skip or stop, or you know, I think a good artist can make you, like, you know, snap out of time in a sense. You know, it's could take you to a place, and so I was really obsessed with that sort of thing. So my artistry as a DJ was kind of, I think it's different than my artistry now, you know, over in the last, when I started my Kundalini awakening healing journey, I just kind of naturally started outputting a lot of my own writing and my own spoken word. There's a lot of stuff that I've written and wrote that I'm like, I don't know who wrote that, but they used my body. You know, this is like, the muse worked through me. I seem to have put myself in the right position and threw out a couple nets, and, you know, I caught some jellyfish or something, you know, and gave them to the world. So I started kind of leaning a little bit farther away from DJing, being less in bars and clubs and these sorts of things. I was super sensitive to being in bars and clubs late at night. You know, we use the term spirits for alcohol. I think that you've discussed this as well. I think you did it actually with your recent podcast when he was talking about alcohol. I just became ultra sensitive to those things. And so I kind of had this, I need to keep my artistry, you know, I have this need to express myself. I have this something, something inside me wants to communicate or communicate through me. Started doing more spoken word. I've always been a fan of hip hop and those sorts of things. So I think there's like an innately, I would hate to call myself a rapper. I think that sounds so weird, but I do like, I write a lot of rap. But there's kind of like a spiritual tendency to a lot of what I write if you listen to it.
And the
So
links
yeah,
for
man.
that, I just want to invite our audience to check out your Instagram. The links will be in the description. But we'll keep going. Sorry to cut you off. I had to
No.
throw that plug in there.
I thank you. Yeah, and I feel like actually probably Instagram is my best. You know, I have some songs on Spotify. I like to call everything a demo, because, you know, although like I technically have an audio engineering degree, I won't just sit and spend time like trying to mix and master my stuff. Like for one, it's a lot of it is beyond my skill level. You know, I don't know everything about all this stuff. Um, but I like I said, just throw it out a net and like, cool, I caught something, let's share it. You know, I like this lo-fi sort of, you know, so I have some stuff on Spotify. It's like sound art, you know, there's this like kind of hip hop, but it's just kind of like an expression of the thought that I seem to have caught. But yeah, my Instagram has certainly been it's interesting, man, because we have these, and I don't know, I mean, maybe you experience this sorts of stuff too, Brett. You know, with Instagram and podcasting, is you kind of instantly get put into a bubble or a category. You know, it's like, oh, are you trying to be an influencer? You know, are you trying to uh, like, are you trying to sell something? You know,
Yeah.
but I've always tried to keep it. Yeah, I always try to keep it to where it doesn't, because that feels icky to me. You know, like I never had advertisements on my podcast. I never had those sorts of things. 'Cause that feels like it's instantly trying to sneak, like, oh, hey, look how spiritual I am. I'll help you, but also buy this thing that pays my bills. You know, there's an integration that I think is you know can be worked on, but I just really wanted it to feel authentic, and so my Instagram is definitely that. Like I try to treat it as, you know, an expressive outlet and not as I'm an I want to be an influencer on Instagram, or I want to achieve this thing. You know, I've never tried to sell anything, any of that. So it's just been my creative outlet. I really think that um, I think that if you can penetrate people in their day-to-day life, as we're all, you know, me for sure, I have my tendencies to just scroll kind of mindlessly. You know, it's something I'm always struggling with. Sometimes I do it too much. Sometimes I'm on top of it. But there is times where I'm scrolling and somebody can say something, or like I can get this spoken word, or I can get this clip from a podcast that just boom makes you suddenly realize that like you're looking at your phone and there's a background to your phone and you're in a room, and it just kind of sends you out of your body in a sense. And I always really wanted my work to do that in some ways. I want my artistry to be some sort of koan, you know, a Zen koan of I wanted to put you in a place that you weren't planning on going today, you know. And again, just describing that sounds very self grandiose, but that's kind of part of it, you know. That's a lot of my, with the intertwining of my spirituality and my artistry is not denying my ego, not denying that, like, you know, not only, you know, nerves, but um like if I'm speaking to people on a stage, or I'm speaking to people, you know, okay, I've got a couple hundred people listening to this podcast, like that feels cool, you know. Noticing that, like noticing that you have like an ego side that, you know, for me, like I said, I came from a background of DJing where people know my name, you know, like people in my hometown know me as what up Kronos, and like I don't know who they are, you know. And there's a balance of for a while I tried to kill the ego, I tried to reject it, you know, I tried to uh like, you know, I got to be next level humble and in all these things. But there's, you know, it seems your role as an artist is to behold the ego, is to uh, I have this line: the ego doesn't like change nor grit, but loves to feel withhold.
Mm.
And so a lot of my stuff is kind of a balance of working with the ego. You know, Ram Dass would talk about how on stage he would be completely aware that you know, people love him, they see him as, this is Ram Dass, oh, that's Ram Dass, you know. But he's also just there to do, he's there to do his work, you know. Parts of him are going to notice those things. There's parts of us that I think socially will uh, like those things, but we can't define ourselves by this pedestal that other people put us on, in a sense. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like, I try to integrate my, I try to live my philosophy and my creativity and my artistry as naturally as I can. You know, I try to, you know, if I go for a walk and I have a thought come into my head that I think is kind of cool or helpful or fun, I want to share it, you know. But I'm not trying to share it to accomplish something. I'm not trying to share it to you know, gain more followers, or you know, tell everybody how cool I am. You know, it's this I try to use social media as a genuine like tool for communicating the inside of my mind in a sense, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's like active philosophy, you know, that's like actually practicing philosophy. Um, and Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes, you know, as we're scrolling through, when something real pops up, we note it as real. You know, there's all these people trying to sell us stuff. There's all these advertisements. There's all these, you know, like it's just obvious to us when you've got a podcast. Like if I have a Monster Energy drink sitting right here and the logo is perfectly faced, you know, that's okay. Like cool, okay, we get it. You're sponsored by Monster, but there's just like this level of truth that we want to be about that sort of thing, you know. And I would hate for me having this Monster logo sponsorship to deter or change anything, even 1% of how I'm going to communicate, of the ideas that I catch and communicate. So yeah, it's just I don't know, my social media presence is really like it's almost like this I'm massively aware, but it's almost like a second ego in a sense, right? It's like almost like this digital ego of representing ourselves, you know. And we talked, Brent, about the beginning of your, you know, you were into is it photography or videography? I apologize.
Photography.
Photography, yeah. And you notice that, you know, you have this photography page and you start talking about spiritual stuff on there and people are like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about, dude? And so I've gone through that entirely that same thing of trying to find this balance of living through my truth of like, yeah, I want to be an artist, but like I'm not creating this artist to get famous and get money and like you know, so I can drive a fast car. It's like, no, I want to be honest about it. Every day I'm trying to live as an artist. I'm trying to be as a poet would be in my day-to-day life. I'm trying to show up as fully as I can, and be aware that I have these different kind of aliases in a sense, but not lose myself into my alias to where I'm denying the truth of my being, you know, because I think that's so easy to do as an artist. I think, I was talking about the 27 Club. We get so kind of obsessed with our image, like, oh, they'll listen to me when I'm gone, you know, that sort of thing. And it could just be certainly massively toxic, you know. So
Hmm.
I'm sure that you maybe deal with some of the similar things of trying to balance, you know, your personas in a way. I don't know. Do you ever have any like debacle between who you show up as, you know, like who maybe your coworkers know you as, or who I think you're doing some schooling, like maybe who they know you as versus Brent Spirit. Do you ever feel any like trip up between these kind of characters you've created at all?
Yeah. So I think it's taken a long time because like you described in your own journey, it's an ongoing sort of dance and trying to figure it out. And I had my own issues with working as an artist, a photographer, but then also having these like spiritual things that I wanted to express. And of course, people that are interested in my photography are like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I think that came from a more ungrounded place as well, like we were describing earlier, that we could both relate with, just that feeling of having to like vomit out all this spiritual stuff to whoever would listen, right? So now I found peace by compartmentalizing my two I guess you could say brands or identities. But in particular, I think I've described this before. Brent Spirit is a character. When I'm sitting here in this chair, that's Brent Spirit. And I want people to know that when I turn this off, I'm not Brent Spirit. I'm Brent. Like I'm a normal guy, like, like eat junk food, like,
Mhm.
have awkward conversations with people and think about it later, go, "Oh, why did I say that?" or something, like I'm a normal guy. And I want to make that clear. Um, at this point in my brand or whatever, or this journey, I'm not too disclosing of my personal life, because I don't want it to be about me as much as it is about I love the way you described the ideas that I'm catching and presenting,
Mhm.
and not so much about me. But I do recognize, of course, the validity of the story in the background. And so it's a fine balance of those two things. But I can totally relate, and I know that many others can. I think along the lines of what you're saying, you're speaking as as an artist that's not creating art as a means to an end, to become somebody or to sell something. It's for the end in itself. And as you were speaking, I remember it's a key concept in Bhagavad Gita, um, where Krishna says, "You're entitled to the work. That's your reward, is the work itself. But the fruits of your labor, that all belongs to God." So you
Mm,
don't work thinking, okay, you're gonna get paid or something. You work so presently in the moment, and that is the reward of the gift itself, the creation itself. And
mm, mm,
paradoxically, I think those are the best artists. They tend to do well at some point. They tend to have some impact. But then I was also thinking as you were speaking that I mean, back before social media, the idea of being a poet and becoming like world famous, that was completely ludicrous. And so poets were poets because of poetry, or artists were artists because that's what they had, that's what the muse wanted them to do. There was no Instagram to post it on. These people maybe lived in a small little village with same 100 people that saw their paintings, and that was it. And so the reward, I think, was the art itself, not the accolades that may or may not come. And I think that's a key theme in Stephen Pressfield's work, like you were describing. The muse inspires you to create, and that feels so good in itself. And that seems to be what I like to try and remind myself of, because I can also get caught up in ideas of like, I look at the like, oh, how many views did this video get, and
mm.
how does it compare to the last one? And then I remember like, it's completely out of my control. It's
It doesn't matter.
completely something else. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas, if you had a boss or you have a sponsorship that's like, hey, your viewership is down, like you don't want to lose your sponsorship, right? It's kind of, you know, I think in any artist or any creator who's using their creative stuff to pay their bills, I think that's an easy thing to get caught in. Luckily, I have my work in live events is separated from a lot of this work. As much as I try to keep it all kind of just like there's no secrets with me. There's no, like if somebody on the job site, it's like, hey, I found your social media. What's this all about? Like, I would love to tell them all about it, but like right now I'm here, oh, you hired me to be a lighting tech today. So that's who I am. Um, but yeah, I think, I do find it very interesting, like the integration of being an artist and making sure everybody knows you're an artist, or like being treated as an artist. I think we see it with a lot of famous people sometimes. We'll see videos or clips where um you know like it's kind of has this "don't you know who I am" flavor to it, which is yeah, man, like I saw this video once. It was, I think it was Jay-Z on a subway, and he was talking to this old lady, and she was like asking what he does, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a rapper," and she's like, "Oh," and she's like, "Oh," I don't remember exactly. Maybe she said like, "My grandkids like rap," or something, and um, basically she had never heard about Jay-Z. She doesn't know about Jay-Z, which to most of us is like, "What, you know about Jay-Z?" Uh, but dude, all he is to her in that moment is just a man on the subway, and like, "Oh, we're talking about work, and oh, you rap? That's pretty cool. Well, here's what I did in my life," And I think we can get caught up in a version of, like, what if Jay-Z was offended? Like, you don't know who I am, and suddenly you can't connect with this person, So yeah, there's this way where we want to take our artistry with us, whether you have fame or not. But there is kind of this like trying to introduce it. You're trying to control the narrative of who you are. You're trying to control how people see you at all times. And I think that like a lot of artists get caught up in this, and it's this dance of the ego. But I really like just trying to be very natural and open and honest about that integration. Um, uh, I had this example yesterday. So I think that even outside of people knowing me as an artist, or if they've ever listened to any of my stuff, or if they've followed me or any of that, it's been pretty cool over the last couple of years just to I'm not trying to force any sort of spiritual talk on anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody, if they want to talk about the Family Guy episode last night and I saw it, cool, I would love to talk about that. That sounds fun. Let's laugh together. And they don't have to know anything about me being spiritual. But it's actually very cool when you relax that like need to like, hey, don't you want to heal your childhood trauma? It seems inevitably people notice what subject areas you seem to be, wise or intelligent about. So yesterday I was on this gig. I actually I didn't even know it until I got to the gig, but it was a private event for the band One Republic down in San Antonio. And I only know that because I didn't meet them or see them or anything, but we're pushing in the cases and I saw their name on the thing. But this younger guy who through this company, I'm a supervisor for a lot of their shows, and basically like there's a lot of roles where I'm teaching younger guys, like in their early 20s about the world and about what we do, and it's really cool because I get to be kind of this leadership role. I really like being a leader when I can, and so I'm not only teaching them about the correct wires for this and this is how this runs and this is how we do this in this world, but also just by me being present and me being interested in the things that I'm interested in, they notice that I'm knowledgeable or a person who can give them, maybe good advice or something on the subject. So anyway, last night, this younger guy that I've worked with who kind of like asked me some inquisitive questions, I feel like he really listens when I talk. And so I try to take that serious. It seems like he actually does want to learn something from me. He was like, man, I'm so glad to see you. I've been meaning to tell you, I had sleep paralysis the other night, and then I fell back asleep. And he starts talking about all this lucid dreaming stuff, and it's so cool to me. He sees me as someone who is knowledgeable and willing to speak about lucid dreaming and the dream world, and then so we kind of get into the whole gig. We're kind of talking about lucid dreaming and all these really interesting stuff, and he's inquisitive to me. And I'm just talking about things that I'm genuinely interested in. He's asking me questions and I'm just telling him the truth. Like, oh, I read this book on this and it seems like this thing sort of happened. So it, I think to round about what I'm trying to say is that when you just show up as who you are, rather than trying to run around with a microphone or a megaphone telling everybody that you are this thing, I think that opportunities to be the expression of who you are and the things that you're interested in actually come about more often than you may think.
Oh, wow. Well said. Well said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was hoping that made sense. Um, but yeah, a lot of my life these days seems kind of like that. Like I just try to, I'm not meditating so I can be an ultimate meditator and like teach everybody I meet about meditation. But I meditate so I could be a true expression of who and what I am. And when other people stop by and they happen to need that, and here I am,
Hmm.
it's just like this. And I think you can get what I'm trying to point out. There's this level of being an artist, of being a poet, a creator, a content creator, an influencer, where you're like, I'm this, don't you want to hear about it? I'm this, don't you want to hear about it? But it's like, this is actually, it's all very spiritual. Being an artist is your work. It's only your work. And other people don't have to give a crap about it. As great as it is to create something and have other people see it and have an audience, and there is that whole realm, and that's amazing. But there's also a way in which you got to be honest with yourself, man. If you're obsessive about this philosophy, meditation stuff, then be obsessed about it. Like, you don't have to run around the streets and tell everybody about it. But I think that there's a reason why there's not only a reason for other people in your relationships in your life for you to pursue your interest in such ways, but there's also you'll begin to notice that when people are trying to come up for air, there you are.
Mm.
Like you have the answers. You weren't planning on talking about those things that day, or you weren't reading this book so you could go on and tell everybody about the concepts in this book. And if that's what you do, if you have a YouTube channel and that's what you do, like, that's cool, man. That's whatever. But I think there's this beautiful intertwining with artistry, this like artistic spirituality of sorts, that is, you do your work and just trust that you are affecting the people around you. You know,
Right.
your
Right.
audience is just people in the street, your coworkers, you know, your family. Just the presence that you bring because you do your own work isn't about you walking into the room of your family and going, you all need to meditate right now. It's about as they're screaming at each other and you seem to be at peace, like they can't ignore that, you know, like they're going to start asking questions in a sense, you know. So yeah, it's just spirituality and artistry. It's very personal, man. It's very personal. As much as it's performed on the stage, as much as it's given to the world, as much as it's presented in this sort of way, it's a deep personal work, you know. And it's almost your job as you've spoken nicely about a lot of like Kundalini stuff is like spiritual puberty in a sense, and it's kind of a lot of what it is. It's like this, your spirituality as an artist, I think, is a way of working on your maturity. Like you're maturing into what's trying to be communicated through you. And you know, getting obsessed with like how other people think about you, or how you're presented, or you know, where your work goes, and all this sort of stuff kind of gets in the way of your own personal work. I don't know. I guess I'll kind of round out there, but I think overall, just the intense personal nature of being an artist is very important. It's not about other people. It's not about. It's not really about the artist. It's a very it's your own maturity trying to work through itself. And I think that, you know, there's ways that we can be untruthful to the art if we're trying to strangle it, if we're trying to hold it, if we're trying to present it in a certain way. You know, it's a, I don't know, it's very personal.
Right. I love the way you say that. It is very personal. Spirituality, artistry. What's coming to me here is, you know, if you're in a relationship with another person, your relationship between the two of you is also a personal thing that you don't necessarily present to the world. Whereas, you know, you may see some celebrities, uh, you know, whether it's staged or not, but you know, they like have a TV show that portrays their relationship to the world, and it's now a public affair. Whereas our relationship with our spirituality, our relationship with our artistry, our art is personal. And maybe some of it will leak out into the public here and there. But I like the way you're describing that. And going back to the way that you're playing a sort of mentor. I don't know if that word feels right for you, but it sounds like that to me in terms of when you're at work and whatnot. I was thinking of asking you whether you'd consider yourself a light worker. Um, this idea of like, you know, somebody with some sort of spiritual intention, you know, doing works of service out in the world. I'm interested to get your take on that, but it seems that, you know, you're living your spiritual awakening out in a very integrated way that is necessary at this time. What I've said before is that, yeah, I mean, I play this, you know, spiritual teacher, and for the most part, those are the people that we hear from who write books, do videos, whatever. And others go through spiritual awakening and think, well, that must be the only job that's there for me now, is to, you know,
Mm,
start being a spiritual podcaster or something. Because we don't hear so much from people that are like yourself, working in, you know, the entertainment industry, as a supervisor, supporting other people to do their work, and intertwined in there, you're throwing in some of the wisdom that you've gained along the way. And I think that's absolutely necessary to get this ascension going, because we can't all go on retreats and leave our jobs and start, you know, like you did, you know, consuming hours and hours of content every day and meditating all the time. Some people, their satsang is you know, on the job, wiring up some lights and speakers and whatnot. Maybe that's what it is. I'm curious to get your take on that. How does that feel for you? Maybe I'm way off. Would you
mm.
consider yourself a light worker?
No, yeah, I really like how you pointed that out. I don't think light worker is a term that I use, but obviously it's in my vicinity. You know, I hear it all the time, and I like it. I like the way you describe it. I think, yeah, even before my spiritual stuff, I've always been a bit of a chameleon. I can kind of assimilate to whatever situation. There's a lot of ways where I think that kind of like my childhood traumatic, you know, I basically realized from a young age, oh, nobody's taking care of me. I've got to figure out how people work. I got to figure out how society works. I got to figure out how to like take care of myself. And so I was very observant of everybody. I watch everybody, and I, my way of learning is kind of like, oh, okay, so people do that. I understand. And then I would go and act. It's almost the birthplace of people pleasing in a lot of ways too. That's been a lot of my journey, is kind of unraveling that. But my chameleon nature allows me to connect with people in a way that kind of like penetrates and reflects so okay, so like if I'm describing a chameleon nature, there's, say there's two versions of us. There's our social self, and then there's our internal dialogue, and a lot of times people can be projecting or being a chameleon of the social self. Like if someone shows up to me and they're like, I'm this job, and I'm a mom, and I have this car, and that's like who they're trying to be and who they're trying to interact with me as. I have this natural ability, it seems, to reflect back to you who you are, but not who the persona is of who you are. It's almost like sometimes I really try to come across as kind and sweet, and I very much love people, but oftentimes I notice that I'm triggering people by just I'm almost like reflecting back to them something that they may be thinking inside, in a sense, and there is some sort of like attraction to that in some sort of ways from other people. Like it's almost like when someone is ready for the truth, they stumble on my path or something like that. And again, that sounds like really big-headed, but they're just like a way that I will notice. Some friends that have like told me this, but also just something that I've just been observant of is I will speak to people in a way in which nobody has ever spoken to them. I will, not just by the way that my subject, like, certain subjects just don't get talked about. You don't talk about politics and God at the dinner table, that sort of thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the most fun, let's talk about God. That sounds so fun. But I don't know. Yeah, there's a way that I think that now that I'm aware of it, man, I think that there is ways where just me being my true self does kind of, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like it influences, like there is some Shakti pot. There is spiritual things that happen within other people by having conversations with me. And I'm not really sure where to put that. You may have that. That might be not even just like a me thing. That might be anybody on the spiritual path. It's like I almost maybe accidentally like give people little glimpses of something that they didn't realize they were carrying around or something, or like I think love and intimate relationships can often show you this, of like they allow the truest version of you to express itself, and that is so many layers deep behind people sometimes. And so I think in some senses I would consider myself a light worker. Again, it's not super intentional. It's just my own work. It's
Right.
my own, what we practice in private is what other people hear, or what there's some artist thing like you're showing everybody something you made in your dark basement. Like I just go in my dark basement and I do my work. And if you're willing to meet me there, if you're willing to meet me where you really are and where I really am, there could really be some, spiritual energy exchanged, whether we're, neither of us are trying to have that thing, I think intentionally, consciously anyway. But yeah, I'll have conversations with people and I could tell, or they will tell me afterwards, that they've never had any sort of conversation like that before. And I'm like, oh, that's just kind of just what I was thinking about that day,
Mhm.
those sorts of things. I don't know if that really answers your light worker question, Brett.
No, it's perfect. It's a perfect answer, and I think we're broaching a topic there that many out there going through something so profound as Kundalini awakening are thinking it and feeling it and experiencing it. Yes, it does have an impact on others. this energy I like to describe is contagious, and that can cause us to, in the way you said, feel like, we're getting a little arrogant, big-headed, and we, might want to even shut it down or think, how can I be influencing other people, or radiating something, or they're being attracted to me and whatnot. But let's get it out there in the open. Yeah, we are all radiating. Every human being is radiating. This is science. The heart emanates an electromagnetic field. Our nervous systems can co-regulate each other. There is something unspoken that's being transmitted. Now, somebody who's gone through something like you described, spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, the deep inner healing, they're radiating some component of that. And so, yeah, it happens. But as long as we are like you were saying, I'm just doing my work. I'm just me. I'm not going around saying, hey, come to me, I'll change your life. You're not saying that, hey, I'll blast your mind with some cool line I have, or some look in your eye or something. You're just doing you, and people come if they're in a position to receive something from you, you receive it. And I'm sure others are you're receiving things from them. I receive things from other people as well. We're all exchanging information. So I just love the way you're describing this, because I know many on the path are in fact the complete opposite of what we may call a narcissist. They're so afraid of going in any direction that may be in alignment with some sort of arrogance, and that causes them to be like, super insecure, small, hide. But no, we have to just come out, and yeah, if people are meant to pick up on something we have to offer, well, let them pick up on it. And of course, it doesn't happen to everybody. Some people would say, Sri Ramana Maharshi, greatest saint ever. Some people just looked at a photo of him and it changed their life. Other people in person, just being in his field, experience incredible spaciousness and peace. Yeah. But other people were like, well, what's the deal with this Indian guy wearing, it's a cloth as his underwear and just sitting around? Like, what the hell's going on here? You guys are all weird, right?
It's not like he like said, hey, take a picture of me. And so when people see it, they get enlightened. Is it like there's just a picture of him and someone saw it? Ram Dass actually I just heard a talk, I think yesterday, from Ram Dass, how he was talking about something that he saw in this, I don't remember exactly, some like Christ movie that he had seen. I don't know if it was Passion of the Christ or what exactly. But the way that they would depict before he'd do a miracle was like, okay, we need this miracle done. And he would stand in front of it and go, like, and then like the miracle would happen, And it is like I love how he describes that, because it's like, oh, that's not how it is. It's not a trying. It's not a it really is in a lot of ways is you just being who you are, getting out of your own way in every moment, and allowing this insane spiritual energy to kind of work through you. And if someone is right for it, cool. And if they're not right for it, they're going to go like, why are you looking at this picture of an old half-naked dude with a blanket on? Like, that means nothing to me. But again with Ram Dass, I know I talk about him a lot, but he's just I've been a lot of his like heart-centered work has been really helpful for me. But yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's a presence. I don't know. I think it's very fascinating, like the word ripe that he uses. And I wonder if you think about this, like what is it that makes, like if I'm sitting here with, say my best friend from childhood, and we've had a lot of similar experiences, we're a lot alike, we're best friends or whatever, and I'm listening to you on a podcast and you say something and I'm like, what? Hold the phone, pause it. What? That is the craziest thing I've ever, like my mind is blown by it. And he's like, what? Why is that important to you? Like, what is it that makes me so ripe to hear that thing at that time? Like, I think that's rather fascinating. Why is it that I had these experiences? There's studies about mystical experiences where, people who just live their everyday to day lives, maybe they've done psychedelics one time, maybe they've had, in a church setting, they've had like this profound, what they would call, a very important part in their life, like a very life-changing reality altering moment in their life. Some of us, it could change the trajectory of our entire life. It could change the course of everything about us, and that seems to be what happens with us with Kundalini is, we have these profound spiritual experiences, this initial kind of awakening. For some people, they could have this, like I said, my best friend sitting next to me or something, he could read the exact same thing. He could have the exact same thing happen. And it's not about the words. It's about like the weaving of them at the exact right moment. You have to be right for these sort of things. And I think, I don't know, man, it's just very fascinating. What do you think? What is that? What is like, why are some of us more ripe for these certain moments than others? And what is I mean, what's the playbook here? It's like a koan could be so profound to me, but someone could listen to it and not hear the same thing at all that I heard. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot to do with the uniqueness of this path, that we all have different things that we're working out. Um, and one way I've described it is that even right now, there may not be mind-blowing conversation between you and I, but there's behind the scenes, like pieces are being laid. And
Mm,
at some point, there like the centerpiece will fall into place, and then it'll all be a mind-blowing experience. And so I looked at it that way, like everybody has a different pace that their pieces come into place, different things, different themes. And I think it makes it so much more interesting. Otherwise, this path would be like super linear, it'd be like, okay, everybody read this book, okay, everybody read this poem,
yeah.
listen to this guy's to this one talk, go to
Yeah.
this timestamp, and then
This is the book
ta-da.
for level 13 of enlightenment is this book. You got to read it
Right.
in this grade. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so I think it just can it shows that this path is so unique for us all. And that's why I want to have guests on like yourself. You shared such a unique journey, and we all have shared unique journeys, but some people will resonate with some of the major themes in yours and say, the other people didn't speak to me. But Jacob, what he said, that was a centerpiece for me. That was it clicked for me when he said that.
Mm,
And so I think that's how we all support each other. I'm curious if that's speaking to you, or if you got anything else
mm.
to add.
No, no, entirely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of correlates right with what I was saying, like somehow what I'm communicating or somehow what you're communicating is that passenger side mirror of a 1996 Buick LeSabre or whatever, it's just the right part. I was thinking about a term I've used in my writing, that I had just looked back on my notes, is the bottom dropping out. In a lot of like the spiritual practice is just a continuously the bottom dropping out, and now it's a very exciting thing. It's like something you almost want, and there's almost like a desire for, oh, cool, I could have another revelation, because awakening is not a moment, it's a continuous, you're consistently awakening. And sometimes it feels like you backpedal, but then you realize you hadn't, and you're, it's this whole thing. It reminds me of what I was visualizing when you were talking, Brent, was those at an arcade, those quarter machines where you drop like a token or a quarter,
Yeah.
and they're just going back and forth. And if you drop the right token or the right quarter at the right spot and you angle it just right, it's going to push 5 to 50 quarters off.
Hmm.
And sometimes they're just little quarters being laid. There's just little tokens in our life that are being placed in the right spot, and they're stacking up. But when they drop out, it's going to be a big dropout. You're going to
Right.
win big. So yeah, I think that's so fascinating. I love um, it just seems like, Ron Bus uses the word ripeness, or you're just ripe. And I've heard other spiritual teachers use it too. And it's really just a reminder to follow the path for you, I'm sorry, it's a reminder to follow your path, not necessarily the path. It's right up there in line with your goal is not to be a good meditator. You're not supposed to be the best meditator. Like, I'm good at meditating now, I'm spiritual. It's like, maybe that's not your path. Um, maybe it's not about sitting down to read The War of Art. Maybe it's about you're an extreme person who does things. You got to go all in, and so what you need is to put headphones in and buy the audiobook and run until you're finished with the book. It's just like we all have. Uh, there's like there's a very personal intuition for all of us. You know, it's not like you're, as much as, you know, we talk about tapping into the muse, and there's this continuous kind of collective unconscious that speaks to us in a sense, to use Carl Jung's wordings of collective unconscious. But there's a very personal spiritual path for each of us, and it's like, and it's okay is the thing. Your personal spiritual path is okay. You know, maybe suddenly you get this moment like me where you realize that you've kind of been a shitty person and you're not living to your truth, and the person that, you know, served you well for a long time was really great, but suddenly this person just does not serve who you want to be in the future. You know, maybe you realize that, and the answer isn't to sell all your clothes, buy white and orange cloaks, and join a Buddhist monastery. You know, maybe it's, ah man, I've been drinking 17 beers a night. Like I'm gonna only drink 16 tomorrow. You know, that's an extreme example, but it really is like, you got to step on the path where you're at. You
Mm.
can't, as much as we could use other people's lives and their stories and their journeys as influences and inspiration and all this stuff. You know, I think that's been a huge thing for me, is learning that my path is okay. You know, my spiritual journey is personal, and that's okay. You know, and I can't do it the way that other people did it. I tried to read this. Um, I forget the, have you heard of the term in meditation, stream entry?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
got this.
Buddhist term, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a step-by-step process. This is actually fun. Like, it's weird to describe. It's like a step-by-step process for like um, reaching samadhi and stuff. Like, there's, I think it's something like it's like a 10 step. Anyway, I bought this book in the throes of me being obsessed with all this stuff and meditation, and I bought this book. John Koldasa, I think is his name, one of the authors. Um, and man, I remember just like trying to push myself. Okay, I got to meditate for this long each day. It says to do this. I'm going to do this meditation. Um, when in actuality, like, maybe what I needed was to just walk outside in the morning and pull up YouTube and just click on whatever, like, oh, that seems like a cool meditation. I'm going to do my meditation today, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So anyway, I guess just like, just believing our own personal spiritual paths and stepping on it where we're at. You know, maybe we're 100 miles from the path, so we think, but you know, walking north towards the path, if it's north, is better than walking south. You know, uh, so
Yeah.
just walk in the direction of what your spiritual path is, I think, is what I'm trying to say here.
Oh, well said. I think many will resonate with that and find some peace and acceptance of where they're at, because of course, you know, sometimes people think they're doing something wrong, or that they're messing it up, and that because their path doesn't look like someone else's path. I think it was Ajay Shanti who, like you, also had a very, I guess you could say, masculine approach to just going at it, meditating really intensely and trying to make it, trying. And this was the same for me. I was very masculine in my approach early on. And Adyashanti describes, and I can also agree, he says his spiritual path was one of failure. It just, all of his efforts failed. Um, he may use the term, I'm not sure, but I like to say I became exhausted by those efforts. Like, I was so exhausted, and that's when shifts happen, when I just burnt myself out. And that was my path. When I look back, on one level, we could say, well, that was the incorrect approach, but maybe trying really hard was the approach for us to get us to exhaust ourselves out. So it's paradoxical. We can't get it wrong.
Mm.
Even if you are trying to, like you said, get on the path where you're at, be true to your own journey. Even if there's somebody out there who's trying to copy another journey or following a book or tradition to the T, that's still their journey too. You see,
Yeah.
it's like it's paradoxical. It's interesting, but ultimately, I think you've shared some incredible wisdom there. We can't get it wrong. Everybody has to get on the path where they're at. That's going to look different, and that's really my intention with having guests on this show, is to show people that, look, I can present my story, my ideas in my own way, but I don't want people to listen to me as if that's the only way. And so, of course, we've got guests on like Jacob to share your story that looks so unique and different. But of course, if we extrapolate, there are the overarching themes of introspection, practicing presence, getting back into the body, getting back into the world, um, living a real life, paying bills, healing, healing the inner child. All of those themes have come up today, and it's been an excellent conversation, Jacob. It's about time that we start to wrap up, but I want to thank you for sharing so openly and in such a real way that I think is going to really speak to a lot of people, and people will say, "Hey, yeah, I'm I can accept my journey as it is." Because we got some inspiration from you, so thank you. So on that note, please let us know how we can further connect with you. All of the links will be in the description, but please feel free to shamelessly tell us about what you've got going on online and how people can tune in and listen to more of what you have to say.
Mm, yeah. Like I said at the beginning, I get to talk about myself, my favorite thing. Yeah, man. Well, thank you, Brent, so much. I've appreciated our interactions and our conversations very greatly. I'm a fan of your work, so it's really cool for us to be able to actually interact and kind of we get to know each other a little bit. So I think it's very cool. I think it's very cool that you're offering this space for people. You know, dude, it's such a we've talked about this before. It's such an alienating journey, and you feel wonky, man. This whole thing is just crazy. Whether you use the terminology of Kundalini, or even if you use the word spirituality or whatever, we're gonna stumble into our books and our learnings of what wordings and stuff make sense to us. Maybe it's through a certain religion, maybe it's through healing from that religion. Maybe that religion harmed you when you were younger, and you're trying to find spirituality after that as an adult. There's all these different levels of it, and so yeah, I think it's very important and very cool that you offer space for all of us in different levels and different paths, and there's no really wrong or right way. It's just kind of about listening to your intuitive way of guidance. And yeah, I'm really just a fan of your show. I just love listening to spiritual conversations anyway. I love hearing when people express themselves, how they're going through certain things or they've been through that, and then I remember, oh dude, I had that happen too. That's actually pretty crazy, and it all correlates. So yeah, man, thank you so much. But yeah, so I would say probably these days Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me, Jacob from the internet. And that is just, I try to post my podcast clips on there with guests. I try to post poetry, spoken word. Like I said, I do some hip hop stuff. I'll do some DJ work. I have like all these different facets of my creative journey that, sometimes I have 4 months of just like hard DJing, and that's what I'll be posting. Sometimes I have moments of being very introspective. Sometimes I'm going through another like awakening layer, and so I'm trying to share that. I try to be vulnerable on there. Like I said, I have podcast episodes that are like just cringy to listen back to, but it's just where I was at that time, and so that's just okay. Jacob from the internet on Instagram, the Junkyard Love podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. I believe my YouTube channel is Jacob from the internet. Either way, the Junkyard Love podcast or Jacob from the internet, you will find me. And I'm always just kind of sharing. I am known to like suddenly realize I need a break from all this stuff, and so maybe I'll drop off the face of the earth for a month or two on social media. But for the most part, I like to post. I like to share my story, my thoughts. I like to share on my Instagram like things that I'm thinking about, or my poetry, or things that I've found in the world. Like if I'm listening to your podcast, Brent, and there's just this magical 23 seconds of you saying something, I'm gonna share that to my story. I think that's super cool. So yeah, I just try to I'm genuinely interested in spirituality and self-growth and all this stuff. And so when I find little bits and pieces of it, I like to share that on my Instagram story and my Instagram. So yeah, man.
Great. So all of the links will be in the description to the Junkyard Love podcast, Instagram, YouTube. I invite everybody to check it out. On your podcast, you've got some I think you call them solo casts where you speak about your journey. You had a talk about your mental health experiences, experiences with I guess cutting out addictions or addictive things, for some time and whatnot, and all very, very fascinating, as well as you've got some great guests on as well, and you
Mhm.
give them a platform to share and explore, and I think even some conversations with some friends too. So invite everybody to check out the Junkyard Love podcast. Jacob, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you so much. If anybody's got a question for Jacob about his journey, you can leave a comment below on the YouTube, or of course get in touch, and I'll invite you, Jacob, to jump in the comments to respond to anybody that has anything for you. So with all that said, thank you so much, Jacob. To our listeners, to our audience, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We really appreciate you. And until next time, much love and peace.
Peace.